This is Florida. As you probably know, it has been one of the fastest growing states in the US for decades. Only between 2000 and 2020, Florida added more than 5.5 million new residents, growing from a population of 16 million to 21 million. And now, just 5 years later, it's closing in on 24 million, placing it on the top of the list of the fastest growing states. But what makes Florida's growth unique isn't just the sheer number of people moving in. It's the way that the growth is reshaping the land itself. Instead of a few dominant cities surrounded by open countryside like Texas, a substantial portion of Florida is filling in with suburban sprawl, highways, and new communities. Just have a look at how far Miami has expanded. To the west, it has already reached the edge of the Everglades, leaving almost no land left to build on. To the north, growth has accelerated even faster, connecting Miami to Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach in what is now one of the largest continuous urban corridors in the country. In fact, nearly the entire east coast of Florida, from Miami in the south to Jacksonville in the north, is lined with development. And it's not just the east. On the Gulf Coast and in central Florida, the spaces between major cities are shrinking every year as suburbs and new communities spread outward. The result is that Florida is starting to look less like a collection of separate cities and more like one giant interconnected urban region. So, how did this happen? And what does it mean for the future of America's third largest state? Florida's urban sprawl is a relatively new phenomenon. For most of its history, it is rural and sparsely populated. In 1950, only about 2.7 million people lived here, fewer than in Kentucky or Alabama at the time. Cities like Miami, Orlando, and Tampa were still small regional centers, surrounded mostly by farmland, swamps, or pine forests. However, that began to change in the mid-20th century. Air conditioning made Florida's hot, humid climate more livable. The interstate highway system connected the state's coast and opened vast tracts of land to development. Retirees from the Northeast flocked to new communities, drawn by warm weather and low taxes. At the same time, Florida started attracting tourism and industry on a scale it had never seen before. And ever since, Florida has just kept growing at a faster pace than most other states. In recent years, the growth has only accelerated. Florida is now the third most populated state in the US, with nearly 23 million residents, more than New York and just behind Texas and California. And it's still growing faster than almost anywhere else. In 2022 alone, more than 400,000 new residents arrived, giving Florida the highest net in-migration of any state. Additionally, close to 92% of Floridians now live in urbanized areas, one of the highest rates in the country. The result is that many of Florida's cities are no longer confined to their original boundaries. As I mentioned at the start of the video, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach have effectively merged into one giant metro area, home to more than 6 million people, making it the sixth largest metro in the country. Driving north along I-95, it's nearly impossible to tell where one city ends and another begins. In central Florida, Orlando is currently the #1 fastest growing large metro in the entire country, and it continues to expand in every direction. To the northeast, Orlando's growth is linking up with Daytona Beach, and to the west, development is pushing toward Tampa, which itself has been spreading rapidly across Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Pasco counties. In fact, if the current growth continues at its pace, Tampa and Orlando could very soon merge into the next metroplex, similar to how Dallas and Fort Worth have formed into one mega region. The two cities are already connected by Interstate 4, which has seen massive investment in recent times, and additionally, the Brightline, Florida's inner-city high-speed rail line, which currently runs from Orlando to Miami, is looking to raise $400 million in order to expand into Tampa as well, further linking the two cities. Even places that used to be considered more remote are booming. Southwest Florida, Cape Coral, Fort Myers, and Naples is one of the fastest growing regions in the country, and because almost all new developments are extremely low density, it allows the cities to expand far out. Just look at Cape Coral. It's basically one giant suburb and doesn't even have a real city center. Jacksonville, the largest city by land area in the US, has also been stretching far inland with new suburbs, even though it's not growing as rapidly as other parts of the state. The exception is most of the Panhandle and obviously the Everglades. But this kind of rapid growth comes with challenges, and a lot of them. The first one is traffic. Florida's interstates consistently rank among the most congested in the US. The I-4 corridor between Tampa and Orlando is especially notorious, with drivers losing an average of 74 hours a year sitting in traffic in the worst stretches. I-95 through Miami and Fort Lauderdale is equally bad or even worse. In fact, according to a study from this year, Miami ranks as the third worst city for traffic in the nation, beating the likes of New York and San Francisco, and rising 9 whole spots from 2024. This infographic from INRIX.com shows the distance a Miami driver can travel from the city center outwards in 30 minutes by the years 2019, 2023, and 2024, showing a substantial decrease in distance over time. Most of these metros were designed around cars, and as they grow together, commuting times are getting longer, not shorter. Another issue is housing. While Florida has historically and even fairly recently been affordable, this has changed dramatically. In Miami, the median home price jumped from around $180,000 in 2012 to over $550,000 in 2022, more than doubling in just a decade. During the pandemic, the state experienced a major housing boom, with median home prices increasing by over 50% from 2020 to 2022, one of the fastest rates in the US history. Just look at this comparison of home prices in South Florida in 2020 versus 2021, where the price increased by a lot in almost every county. Housing unaffordability has become a major issue, with people having to spend a third or even half of their income on housing costs. However, at the moment, the market is experiencing a significant cooling period, with prices dropping in many of the large cities. Still, the drop isn't nearly as dramatic as the increase that happened before it. There's also the environmental and infrastructure costs. Every new subdivision or highway pushes further into wetlands, forests, or farmland. Florida has already lost millions of acres of natural land to development since the 1950s, and the state continues to add about 1,000 new residents every day. That means more pressure on water supplies, more risk of flooding, and more strain on hurricane evacuation systems that were never designed for this many people. The strain on infrastructure is one of the most visible consequences of Florida's non-stop growth. Roads are being widened almost as soon as they're finished, and yet congestion keeps getting worse. The I-4 Ultimate project through Orlando, for example, cost more than $2 billion and took nearly a decade to complete, but traffic levels have already surpassed projections. Florida's growth has transformed it into one of the fastest changing places in the country. But warning signs are already emerging. Declining housing prices, environmental challenges, and mounting infrastructure strain raises the question: how much longer can Florida keep expanding this way, and at what cost?